Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, it's great to see you, and as you know, we've got a limited amount of time, so I'll be concise, and I hope you will be as well. In your statement, you said we owe it to the taxpayers to make the most of every dollar entrusted to us, and then you go on to say one of the ways we're going to do that is the services will achieve savings through implementing better business practices. I looked at many of our Fortune 500 companies to see some of their business practices, and if you look at companies like Walmart, AT&T, Hewlett-Packard, Verizon, IBM, Procter & Gamble, Kroger, Costco, Boeing, Home Depot, Target, they will indicate to you that the core business practice that is superior to all of the others is to make sure they know where their money is going by having audited financial statements. In fact, Congress feels so strongly about that, we required them by law to do the same. Now, in the Department of Defense, we are giving to you what would essentially be the 22nd largest economy in the world if you were a country. It's over $700 billion last year. And as you know, by law, we require our agency heads to submit to us audited financial statements each year so that we know where the money is going. Now, 21 different agencies have complied with that. Clearly, the statute came back and said the Department of Defense needed to do that. And in your statement, you go on to say, proposals we are describing today are the result of a detailed, comprehensive budget and program review led by Secretary Gates and involving the entire senior military and civilian leadership of the Department. So, Mr. Secretary, my question for you, first one today, is what percentage of the $700 billion budget of the Department of Defense did Secretary Gates file the audited financial statements required by law in 2007?
Mr. Forbes, the Department does not have an auditable financial statement.
So none were filed in 2007?
I think one or two agencies, but it's a very small part of the budget.
First of all, you're the Chief Management Officer of the Department of Defense. Is it your testimony today that you do not know how many were filed, or are you testifying that two agencies did file under the Department of Defense?
I'm going to have to provide the exact number.
I'll tell you it was none. How about in 2008?
Well, 2008, I wasn't at the Department.
Do you know whether any financial statements were filed?
I don't think it would have been any.
How about 2009?
I think the same answer.
How about 2010?
I believe the same answer.
Do you know how many will be filed in 2011?
The same.
Do you know what percentage of the $700 billion budget in the Department of Defense will be an audit-ready posture for 2011? That is, that we could even be capable of auditing.
I don't think any, sir.
The President last night told us that in making decisions in our country, he said, and quote, "It will be harder because we'll argue about everything, the cost, the details, the letter of every law. Of course, some countries don't have this problem. If the central government wants a railroad, they build a railroad. No matter how many homes get bulldozed, if they don't want a bad story in the newspaper, it doesn't get written. But we all believe in the rights enshrined in our Constitution." Mr. Secretary, I believe that the Department of Defense has developed the philosophy of bulldozing. When you make a decision, you make the decision, and as Congressman Aiken said, you don't even include us, you don't even give us the information, and then you bulldoze ahead without doing the tough work of trying to work it through us. You know, when we ask you to bring to us individuals who can testify, give us your analysis, give us your documentation of these cuts or anything else, you refuse to do it. So then we ask you to do the report so that we can get the information and we can reach an analysis. And the Secretary does press conferences poo-pooing reports to Congress saying that's just too tough, it's too hard, we're not going to do reports. So then we put it in the law and we say you've got to comply with it because this is the law of the land. But when we did that for a shipbuilding plan, the Secretary just said, I'm not going to give it to you. When we put it in the aviation plan, the Secretary said, we're just not going to give it to you. And when we require audited financial statements so we can just know where our money's going, Secretary just says not going to do it. And the question we ought to be asking ourselves, is DOD above the law? What do we have to do to get you to comply with the law? And how can we even begin to talk about savings and efficiencies when we cannot verify a single dollar of where our defense budget is going? And, Mr. Chairman, I close by just saying this. Shame on us if we continue to give the Department of Defense billions of dollars without doing the most basic of all good business practices, by simply knowing where that money is going. And, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to a couple of the remarks there. First, I agree with Congressman Forbes. We do need to develop auditable financial statements. We've developed a plan to do that. The plan is quite aggressive. It's going to be difficult to achieve, and we have focused on the budgetary resources for the reasons that you gave, that is the most important responsibility to the Department, to be able to tell the Congress and the taxpayers how each dollar is spent. So the Secretary very much agrees that we need to comply with this. We have a plan to do that. With regard to the shipbuilding and the aviation plans, I think that was a disagreement with the committees, as we did provide those when we had them. When the committee was asking for it was in the first couple of months where the administration had taken office, and they simply didn't exist. As soon as they existed, we did provide them to the Department.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to take more of my time, but just to respond to the Secretary. Mr. Secretary, it wasn't the committees that requested it. It was the law that requested when you had to file it, and it told you what to do if you didn't have a plan. And secondly, if any of these Fortune 500 companies came up and said, we just can't comply with the law because it's too hard, what would we do to them? And you know, I think it's a priority that we ought to make in the Department, and we ought to insist on it to this committee. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the explanation.
Thank you.